this is a university town, and we want to celebrate that and our connection with the council and our work together. I have been working with them for 3 years now, building on the strategy through things like Creative Renfrewshire Network, and now onto the Paisley Heritage Asset Strategy. And part of what we're going to do is underpin that with a programme of research that is going to go forward to working into the bid for the Year of Culture, City of Culture. We're going to do a tag team here, so keep going.
Oh, it's me, this one. Yes, so there's a really interesting question about what are the assets of the town beyond the heritage assets? What are the current assets? And what are the human assets? What are the other things that are going on? We have to think really carefully about these questions. We've had an awful lot of talk about heritage, which is clearly massively important. But the town is more than just its heritage. It has to create a different kind of a vision for thinking about heritage into the future. And one of the interesting things about the town is that it's got these immensely long and complicated histories of civic engagement that you probably can't quite see, but it says that, yes, this statue outside this building was erected as a result of subscriptions from people from the Tanner Hill Choir. And this shows this kind of deep history of civic engagement. What does that look like in the 21st century? What does that mean? Is this one me as well?
Yeah, no, it's not. Obviously, this is an iconic building, the Anchor Mill, but I think what's interesting now is as much as this has been turned over to housing, it's about the river development, and there's huge plans within Paisley to look at that river and see how can we do this, and where is the regeneration taking place along that? How can we open that up much more to the people? And so some of the ideas about putting a theatre down at this side and cafes and engagement of the locals and part of that process, we're going to be seeing that come out as part of the bid and look at ways of creating community engagement and creating more of the artists' involvement from that as well.
How about you?
No.
That's me. Yes. So there's the old Arnott's department store outside the building, and of course the question is, who is this housing being built for? How affordable is it? One of the interesting questions about Paisley, we talked a lot about the town centre, has a really big hinterland going out into the rest of the county, going out into Linwood, going up north. And who is going to be living in this town centre when this housing is being built? Why will people stay here? All of those sorts of questions are very complicated. And the other thing to say is that there are many different sorts of Paisleys. We've heard about the Victorian Heritage Industrial Complex, but there are other slightly more difficult stories about Paisley that also need to be kind of acknowledged and brought in the same way as we heard from Derry about the history of deep-seated conflict, deep-seated social problems. Paisley still has all of those things. And I think it's interesting when we think about the colonial history and the industries that are built on the town, there are stories which are very uncomfortable about the way in which those companies and those philanthropists who built all these buildings got hold of all of their money. And there's a need to kind of acknowledge those troubled and complex histories and perhaps complexify the debate a little bit. This one for you.
I think we start to see some of that debate in our things like our open days and our buildings, and we open those up, and we're not shying away from that. We tell that through a storytelling, and people are doing that, and we've got historical projects that are doing that. And I think the way that the Doors Open Day allows the wider community to sometimes get into buildings that we won't have, and I know that goes out through all of Scotland's towns, and I think it's using some of that again to highlight what we have in our cultural heritage, but that cultural heritage is a lived heritage now by the people within Paisley and Renfrewshire, and it's again extending that a little bit. You?
Is that me?
That's you.
Was that me? I thought it was you. Oh, well, we don't need to say anything about that one because we've already heard about that. I'm not going to go fast. I want to move on actually because we are really short of time. No, that one's me. You can do the next one. I think this interesting thing about public realm is also really interesting, and we'll probably hear from Claudia about this as well. There's this really interesting question about how do you transform public space. One of the really great things about this town is we have immensely good open access public spaces right at the centre. How do these become transformed? How do people have really interesting experiences in these? How do people take ownership of these spaces in different ways? How are these spaces kind of programmed and reimagined as spaces of kind of possibility? This is a wonderful fire garden that appeared on Halloween all around the Abbey, and it was quite marvellous to see all these people walking around kind of engaging with the Abbey who probably otherwise wouldn't go in there at all. And it was also a really great atmosphere in the town centre that evening. And I think how to change the atmosphere, how to change the kind of sense of place, and how to have that as an ongoing kind of a programme is interesting. This one's you.
I'm going to steal it back later. So, yeah, we have a lot of the buildings in a public space, but if you look at something like the Russell Institute, I mean, this is a fantastic building that it's going to be used for Skills Development Scotland are going to get in there. I hope, I think, yes, definitely. And that's part of the strategy to look at business incubation within the town centre and within the high street, and putting more small micro businesses and giving them the space to do that along the town centre. The university wants to do the same thing. It's going to take a shop unit within the town centre. I can see I've got Scott here who's going to be doing business incubation again in the town centre, working with the university, looking at startups coming out of the university, working with artists and creatives to grow and to fill some of those spaces and actually try to grow from a micro business as well. This was 3 years ago. We had the very first meeting of the Creative Renfrewshire Network in here, and I spoke at that meeting then, and that's flourished in the town. And I think one of the things that Renfrewshire Council have done that's been really innovative is to say, instead of you just bidding for money from us all the time, we're going to give you money, and then you'll manage that within yourself. So they gave over £50,000 to the Creative Renfrewshire Network, and then they manage that themselves. They can still bid for other monies to them, but for small events and festivals and cultural programmes, they can look at doing that on a much more grassroots basis, where they're not having to go through huge administrative processes, that they've got help and support to do that. And so this was the start of that partnership, and at that meeting there was over 70 people came 3 years ago, and that's more than doubled now as to part of that that network. Stuart referred earlier to PACE, and this is Love Theatre Day, so you can hashtag Love Theatre if you want. I'm actually on the board of PACE here, and the PACE do a lot, as he says, within the PACE Youth Theatre do a lot within the community. And again, this is County Square, is looking at some of the cultural spaces. Next one. And here was the Spiegel tent going up for the first iteration of the spree, which I helped work on the evaluation of that. Now, this is, again, another change in the strategy of what we're doing. Is, yeah, the shop units are empty, and we're trying to do something about that. We're trying to do it through retail, but we can't do it wholly from that. So the strategy from within is to look at an events and festivals and cultural strategy that will regenerate the town. The university's got its role to play in that. We've built a residencies with 350 beds, so we have more students within Paisley staying here. We need them not to go to Glasgow all the time. We need to keep them here. And part of that is we need to have a reason for people to come into the town. One of our speakers spoke earlier about small places that you don't know exist, and things like the Spree Festival are able to do that and able to use those public spaces, which is not just within Paisley but out in our communities, bringing back the gala days that we used to have, bringing back the community festivals, making that a grassroots approach, showing that these are the things that we can celebrate and we will take forward into the City of Culture bid. And a
quick shout out for the Brick City exhibition, which attracted tons and tons of people to come, which was fantastic. But of course, again, question about, it's not just about a visitor economy, it's also about residents, about people who are here also having things that they are super interested in doing. And the Brick City exhibition, so many people through the door of the museum to do the Lego thing. It has been phenomenal. It's been quite amazing to see that happening. We do have artist studios in Paisley, but they're not enormously high quality, and there's a really interesting question, therefore, about what you do with spaces for artists. I mean, we're right on the doorstep of one of the world's great kind of artistic cities, Glasgow. We have phenomenal infrastructure and transport. How do we avoid artists being, as Neil Smith famously said, the shock troops of gentrification? It's not just about gentrification, it's about all sorts of other ways in which artists might play a role in the town. How do arts and design strategies change the way that places are seen? Secondly, we talked a lot about physical renewal. How does this relationship between the renewal of the built environment in the centre of the town relate to different forms of social renewal? The two things are absolutely interlinked, and these are enormously complicated questions about economic development. How do we begin to rethink and reshape these kinds of spaces, and how could we reimagine a high street which allows a very different forms of economic circulation beyond retail? I said we'd go fast. Question of civic engagement is not just about a question of kind of civic engagement in the 19th century sense, it's a question of civic engagement in the 21st century sense, digital engagement, other sorts of conversations. There's Paisley on the website, which is a very important little portal, entirely run by volunteers who are very passionate and committed to the town. Who's in these conversations? Who isn't in these conversations? How do these digital portals work? How does the digital and the physical merge in new forms of kind of urban planning? These are interesting questions. What does a 21st century learning town look like? How do we make that connection between culture and learning and community development and economic development? What's the role of a university in that? It's a big question for us as a university that we have begun to tackle, but we've got a long way to go in terms of thinking about how we can really articulate those relationships, how we as a university can be open, can be a resource for the town, can build on this immense, phenomenal, wonderful heritage that is here, but open that up to a kind of 21st century form of engagement. I'll let you do the last slide because I've been talking for ages.
We just thought this was a nice little image that was put up for saying Saturday kicks off a new season of hope. For obviously we would be remiss if we didn't mention the football stadium
very important.
that we have here as well. And I think that was nicely summed up where we are. We're right on the cultural turn for Paisley. It's a season of hope. We look for the regeneration, the social renewal, and the community engagement. And with that, I think that hope will be a realisation. Thank you very much.
That's us. Thanks.